after working with like Dan and Zhao and seeing how much passion they have for that cuisine, and not only Chinese cuisine but just Asian cuisine in general, it kind of like it kind of ignited something in me that actually, really wanted to keep doing it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. We've heard from many who, against their parents' wishes, began a career in hospitality, all with the opinion if you do something you love, you'll make a success of it. The success of those truly passionate about what they do is part of the beauty and magic of the offering in the restaurant sector. But how do you balance your passion, success, and make a career in the industry too? Brendan Fong is the executive chef of Lilymu in Parramatta, New South Wales. Brendan, how are you going?
Good, thank you.
It's good to have you on the show. You originally weren't going to be a chef, and you ignored your parents' wishes and went for it. Tell us about that period of time.
Oh, well, it's like back in school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I kind of had a feeling that I wanted to cook. Like it was always something that I was interested in, and my parents kind of didn't really want me to be a chef because they saw some people in our family have taken that path and they haven't really been successful at it. So they saw that and they didn't want that for me. And it came to, I was in year 12, I was studying and I wanted to drop out. It was like, they told me not to, just study. So I finally found something that I wanted to do, which was, I was very good with building stuff and solving problems and doing stuff with my hands. So industrial design was like something that, okay, maybe I can give that a go. So the last 3 months of school, I kind of just, studied a little bit and tried to aim for that. And then just the whole process of studying was, wasn't for me. I'm still not good at it now, to be honest with you, but, but yeah. And then I decided I wasn't going to do it. Wasn't going to go to uni. And then just fell into, my parents kind of just gave up and just like, okay, just go work in the kitchen, So, and then that's what happened. I guess we're here.
Well, you've built an incredible career since that moment that we can get into, but you're originally from Fiji. Tell us what food was like as a kid in your family and the move to Australia.
Yeah, I mean, like my parents are from Fiji. They migrated here. Well, I can't remember. I think it was like over 30, 40 years ago from Fiji to work in, they came from Fiji to kind of give us, my sister and my older sister and my brother, a better life. So they moved to Melbourne and they were working like 7 days a week, constantly like 2 to 3 jobs just to try and get by to kind of, give us what we wanted and what we, like I said, a better life. And in that, they'd always look after us in terms of food. We never went hungry. And it was like growing up with Fijian food, it was, very based around coconut milk and, onions and tomatoes and braises and stuff like that. Which is, it was different to go to other people's houses, friends' houses and see they're having like steak and stuff. He's like, what's this? But it was refreshing, Tell
us about that, the first couple of years of your apprenticeship. What was it like in the kitchens that you worked in? Do you have any stories of that time?
Oh, I remember my first job was, the first time I ever stepped into a kitchen on a, not as being a kitchen hand or a dishwasher. It was at Jordan's Seafood in Darling Harbour, and they were doing like, you would do close to like 800 people a night.
Wow.
And I was on the fish and chip section. Being a first year apprentice, I didn't even know how to fry chips. So, yeah, like that was a big eye opener to see. And, to be fair, to go on a big scale like that, I probably stitched myself up a little bit at the time. But now that I look at it, it was a great eye opener into doing large volume, which I think helped me settle into Mr. Wong a bit. Just being used to doing those numbers and stuff like that.
What was those early days when you were doing your apprenticeship? What was a real key restaurant that you worked at that helped you believe that chefing was really for you?
I think the main eye opener was working at Favreau, really. Just seeing that level of commitment that the other chefs put in, and the amount of hard work. Like, I remember we used to start work really about, I was thinking 10 in the morning, so it wasn't that early. But we used to finish at midnight, but we'd never stop the whole day. It would just be and we only did dinner service. We only did lunch on Fridays back then. And I just remember whenever you step in that kitchen at 10, it was just full on. You don't stop. You're either 100% or or nothing. Sorry, excuse me. You're 100% or you're sitting down, and you don't sit down the whole day. It was just, that, I think it was that kind of you're exhausted, but that at the end of the night on a Friday night, you go out and you have fun. Or on a Saturday night, you go out and you party. So it was that kind of work hard, play hard thing that was really exciting.
That was Daryl Felsted's restaurant, he came from that incredible alumni from Bank Restaurant, and that was his first restaurant by himself. What was it like working with him? It was great. Just to see the way he thought about food. And I remember, because I had no experience in that kind of that level, going back then. And it's just seeing his philosophy was always, try and think of something different, reimagining food. I remember doing crab ice cream, and I was like, who the hell does crab ice cream? What the hell is this? But then when you actually try it, you're like, oh, that's pretty good. It was those kind of flavor combinations that were that I used to think, how does this guy think of all this stuff, and just the kind of, well, I didn't imagine the kind of creativity that he had. I remember one dish was hibiscus with black sesame and scallops and kangaroo, I think, and that was no one would ever pair those ingredients together, but somehow he just made it work, and it was, that's what I enjoyed. That's why I enjoyed working for him, because he had those quirky ideas that just kind of, you'd read it on a menu and be like, well, I'm not eating that. But then you'd actually see it on the plate and taste it, and you're just like, wow. Your career has been filled with all sorts of cuisines and different experiences. Tell us about some of them and the real integral moments, and why you headed into the different cuisines.
I think I remember my head chef, my first ever head chef, Roy, from Jordan's. He would always tell me, the first thing he ever said to me was, don't stay in one place for too long. Broaden, always be learning, and to try and broaden your horizons into different cuisines. Because you can't always do. Well, you say you can, but you can't always do the same cuisine for the whole rest of your life. So I kind of took that, to heart with me. And he was he, back being a first year, you'd listen to everything he'd say, because for one, he was pretty scary. And secondly, he had some now that I look back and think about those words that he told me, they were pretty wise words, to tell somebody, who was an apprentice. But yeah, he basically just said, just try and learn everything you can from anywhere, in any cuisine. So I took that to heart, and, I went and did, that modern style with Daryl, a little bit of Japanese at Toko. Back in the day, this is when, Kian Yu was there, and it was, that was probably one of the busiest Japanese restaurants I've ever worked in. And then it was, I never really wanted to do Chinese cuisine, because I liked, eating it so much. So I thought, I always thought, I'd never do that because I'd probably get sick of it. But then I ended up at Mr. Wong after working for Jeremy. And then that's kind of just broadened the horizon of, Chinese cuisine and how much I actually really like it.
You briefly mentioned you worked with Jeremy Strode at Bistrode CBD, the late Jeremy Strode. What was it like working with someone that was so adored and respected in the industry?
To be honest with you, I really loved my time working there with him. And he kind of, what he taught me was basically the philosophy of, less is more. It's the less, and it's one of the hardest things to do as a chef, to kind of show restraint, and he was serving pieces of snapper with rocket and a lemon wedge and just some amazing olive oil, and to have that confidence to do that, and serve that in a restaurant. And I had, his restaurant had a hat constantly, and to have that confidence to do that, it was amazing to learn and to see that he knew his produce. And just, that's pretty much it, really.
I know you've mentioned Mr. Wong quite a few times, but it had quite a massive impact, not only on your career, but so many lives in Sydney and so many careers as chefs. And it's one of the, the really big restaurants of Sydney still. Tell us about what it was like working with that team and creating that amazing restaurant.
It was probably the best experience that I've had. After working there with so many great chefs, you got Victor Leong that came from there, Zhao at Yu, working under those two, was amazing. They had so much talent came and still comes from that kitchen, and especially working under Dan. It's one of the best probably places or decisions I've ever made working for those guys. And then after, working there and kind of taking over after Jowett, they're massive shoes to fill. Because Jowett's, he's a legend in the industry, as well as Dan. So it was quite tough. I learned quite a bit about not only myself, but I learned how to, manage teams and, that kind of, and to think on a big scale and, and how to run such a big restaurant like that. It was a very big eye opener.
As head chef for the first time in such a big, important restaurant, what was it like winning the incredible accolades that the restaurant received?
It was, because that was my first head chef job, it was quite difficult to start, just because, like I said before, there were massive shoes to fill, and to kind of retain those awards that that they had achieved was a great feeling, but it was probably one of the most difficult things that I've kind of undertaken. But satisfying to know that you can do it.
Mr. Wong is notorious for having celebrities and high-profile guests from all over the world. Do you have any stories of your time there and some experiences of those sort of guest dining at the restaurant?
I remember one night sitting, I think it was a Friday or Saturday night, and I was sitting at the counter after work, just having a chat with one of my sous chefs, and this person walks up and just goes, "Oh, this was a great meal, best we've had since Hong Kong or in Hong Kong." Excuse me. And I looked at him and I was like, "Oh, thanks, man. Thank you for the kind words." And I looked and I shook his hand, and it was Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I was like, I just looked up and I was like, "Oh crap!" okay. And I shook his hand, just like, pretended, oh yeah, thank you very much. And then he walked off, and then I was just like, okay, what just happened? But yeah, we met like a lot of celebrities, and we were lucky enough to cook for them, including celebrity chefs like Renee Redzepi. I think Dave Chang came in. Yeah.
You mentioned that you wanted to veer away from cooking Chinese food because you didn't want to get sick of it. But at Mr. Wong, you were open up to the world and made a real name for yourself. Tell us what you love about cooking the cuisine and why that switch changed from steering away to really love cooking it.
I just think, like, because I was so, like, I don't know why I actually thought like that when I was younger. I think it was kind of just me being an idiot, really. And then after working with like Dan and Zhao and seeing how much passion they have for that cuisine, and not only Chinese cuisine, but just Asian cuisine in general, it kind of like it really, like, it kind of ignited something in me that actually, really wanted to keep doing it. And there's so, like, and it, everybody thinks that Chinese food is just, it's just what you get at your local Chinese shop, like, sweet and sour porks, all that kind of stuff. But it's so broad, and there's so many different areas, like cuisines and different flavor profiles, and even each country is different. Like, you get American Chinese, you get Australian Chinese, it's all different, and it's good. It's interesting to see how that one dish varies between different countries. And I think that's why, I kind of just like to stick with it, because it's more interesting to me.
You ended up leaving Mr. Wong and you headed overseas to London. Tell us about that period of time, because you were in London when the pandemic started.
Yeah, so I moved over to London, I think, it was 3 years ago, I think, from now. 4 years now, I think. And it was basically, I was going over to open my own restaurant with a business partner. And then the first thing I had to do was help open his diner concept. And then it kind of just dragged on after a while. And we were in the stages of planning. Like, I think it was like 2 years later, we were in the stages of planning a restaurant. And then it was ready, like the design was ready, everything was ready. And then the pandemic struck. So basically I was at that point where, I didn't know what was going to go on. So we were planning to move to America, and then we couldn't go to America from there. So we just came back, right before London went into lockdown. And I think Australia was already in lockdown then.
You came back and had to do mandatory isolation in Sydney. How were you feeling at that time, having sort of lost the opportunity of opening your own restaurant and finding yourself back in an environment where restaurants were sort of closing and forced into takeaway?
To be honest with you, I was a little bit gutted, because we couldn't open our restaurant in London after, so long, planning and having everything, like going over that process of getting everything ready to actually end that excitement you get when you're designing and you're picking everything, and and then all of a sudden it just gets stripped away from you. It was a bit upsetting, but returning back, we just have to think, it is what it is. We have to think about it in a positive way, and it was lucky that we didn't, because if I was still there, we would have gone almost a year with an empty site and would have been burning through money. So as gutted as I was, I've got to look at it from a positive point of view, where I actually escaped it. Escaped kind of losing that amount of money, and and also being in a safe country like Australia was back there. Australia, we were leading the most safest country back then with the virus. So it was good to be back into somewhere where we're safe rather than stay in London, where London was really bad.
Well, what did you do once you first got settled here, and like how did you find an income to sustain yourself?
Well, basically, I started doing private dinners in people's houses. So I'd create like a tasting menu or banquet menu, like 2 different banquet menus, and then they would pick, and it was all word of mouth. So I never advertised it to anybody, and I think I started it in, was it April or May? So I did it in I think it was May. So I started that in May, and then I would only do it I started my first one, and ever since then, I was booked out every week. And that was how I'd find the income to start off with, because we didn't know how long. I actually didn't know how long we were going to be here for, because we had this plan. We were moving to New York, and then we thought, okay, we come back to Australia. We stay here for about 3 months. So it's kind of why I didn't find a job, why I didn't actually look for work, because I thought, oh, we're not going to be here for that long. So I don't want to commit to anything. I don't want to waste anyone else's time by committing to somebody and then I have to leave. So I started doing private dinners, and I actually found that the dinners through one of my friends. Is like, why don't you do a dinner? Like, just come to my house, cook a dinner for my friends, and and then we'll go from there. He goes, I'll pay all the costs and all that stuff. I said, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I did that dinner, and then that week, my phone was just going crazy because people were scared to go into the city to eat, and they wanted that restaurant experience from home. So I thought, okay, let's just. I said to my wife, let's just do this for however long it takes till we have to go. So we went out, we bought all this equipment, like plates, chopsticks, all that kind of stuff, to people's houses. And then we started doing that every week until I think it was till October, or maybe before that.
How different was it cooking in people's homes compared to working in commercial kitchens?
Oh, it's very different because, everybody's house is different, and the size of the kitchen is different. The bench space they have is different. The stove is different. Even to the space they leave you in the fridge is different. so it's, it has its challenges. And then if you forget something, say for instance, you forget a chopping board, you can't really rely on their stuff because, for one, I don't like to go through their stuff or to use their equipment, even though they welcome you to, go through it. But it's just you're very comfortable with the stuff you have and, using your own equipment. It's when you take, the same notepad everywhere, right? You used to write on that notepad. You take, if you forget your chopping board, using your stuff. So it's working in people's kitchens it's very difficult, and especially PowerPoints, where we have the luxury in a commercial kitchen for PowerPoints. Some kitchens they only had one PowerPoint.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge.
You mentioned that you did these private dinners until October. What changed?
I missed, it was fun, and it was great to meet new people in people's houses. But it's not you miss the stress of a service, of a service where you have a full team behind you. You have, you can see a restaurant that's full, and that when it gets busy, it's that excitement when it's busy. That's what I missed, and it's a different type of stress cooking in someone's house than it is to cooking in a restaurant. And I miss that kind of that feeling of a real busy service, which is, you don't get that cooking in someone's house where, you cook a dish, you only cook 1 or 2 portions and that's it. If it's a banquet, so you really miss that pressure, and which I really like that feeling. It sounds weird, but I really like that kind of stress of being under the pump, being busy. and that was what I was lacking.
Tell us about Lilymu. How did that introduction with Ibby and George come about, and the creation of this restaurant?
Oh, so I was introduced to Ibby through Jad from the picnic. Well, he doesn't have the picnic anymore, but Jad introduced me to Ibby, and Ibby reached out and said, "Oh, can you come in? We'll have a meeting, and I want to chat to you about some ideas that we have." So okay. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just go, because again, we didn't know how long we're going to be here for, and it was going to be and they explained this idea. They had there was development out in Parramatta Square, and they were explaining it. They wanted Asian, and they wanted this, they wanted that, and I was like, okay, cool. It sounds pretty interesting. It sounds pretty exciting. But I had the thought of, Parramatta. Do I really want to work out there? Because I still had that old thinking of how Parramatta was. So then I was like, okay, you know what? I'll just, and I kept, it wasn't October. I think it was June, July. So, and I was still doing private dinners at the time. So I was introduced to him in June, July, and I was doing private dinners plus going to see Ibby and all that kind of stuff. So, I went to the meeting with him, and he explained the site, and it was it looked great. And he had this idea of what he wanted, and then I was just, and they already had a consultant. So the consultant that they had, I think he was in Perth. So he came back, and he couldn't do it because he was opening his own restaurant. Because, as you know, you can't sit still. You got to keep moving, otherwise, because in these times you don't know where your income's going to come from. So then it was I was like, oh, okay, no, I won't do it. I kept saying no. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm bored. I'm sick of doing these private dinners because, for one, it's a lot of work, private dinners, to try and do it at home. And I didn't have a commercial space to prep any of this stuff in, so trying to prep at home is quite difficult. So I was like, okay, I'll stop the private dinners, and then I'll help you do this. And then we had this idea of what he wanted. So I was like, okay, tell me what you exactly what you want. So then he wanted stuff like, a bit of Japanese, a bit of this, a bit of that. And I was like, okay, why try and be something from everywhere when we can just identify ourselves as just one thing? And he was like, okay, what do you want to do? So okay, just let me do a tasting for you, and then we'll go from there. So then I had my sous chef from back when I was at Mr. Wong. He was bus. He wasn't working at the time. So I was like, okay, what are you doing? So I got a job for you. He's like, okay, I'll do it. So I was like, okay, you be the head chef, because I didn't know how long. It was just a consultancy thing for me. I was just going to work there for a little bit, and then that was it. Leave it to Bus, and he can take it. So I thought, what is the easiest way that I can create a menu so that Bus can, after I go, Bus can take the torch and run with it. So I thought, okay, well, we both worked at Mr. Wong. My father's background is Chinese. Bus's background is Thai. And he had a Thai restaurant, in Haymarket, and he closed that. So I thought, okay, how about we combine the two together? Because, they can work. And then we did this tasting, combining Thai dishes in Chinese and Chinese and Thai. And it wasn't a fusion where we were just putting it together for the sake of it. We thought about, we were taking Chinese dishes and kind of looking for something that was similar and combining the two. And that's how the style of Lilymu was kind of born, really.
Do you have any examples of dishes that you created at that time that sort of reflect that?
Well, it's kind of like, we were taking dumplings and like, because I always, dumplings are a seller. So we thought, instead of like making it normal prawn mixed dumpling, we'd take the mix, make that tom yum flavored, and then serve it with a white, like a soy dressing, but also add fish sauce to make it taste like tom yum soup. So it was kind of like, it's examples like that kind of work for us. And even, I guess that was the best example.
Well, tell us what it was like pulling this restaurant together in Parramatta. You originally were hesitant about bringing a restaurant of that ilk to Parramatta. What were some of the challenges?
So basically, like, working in Parramatta, I was like, okay, because I live out, of about 40 minutes from Parramatta. So I was like, okay, and I didn't like. From what I remember, Parramatta wasn't like the safest area back then. From what I remember. So he was like, okay, just come to the site, just come and see it, right? I said, okay, I'll go out with you. We'll go see it. So when I actually went out and saw it, I was like, okay, and it was a new development, and I didn't expect Parramatta to be like that. And it was all brand new. It looked, and I didn't even feel like I felt like I was in the city, to be honest with you. So I was like, okay, it's got a bit of promise. The hardest part from that day that I decided to do it is we had 4 months to get the menu ready, to do the plateware, to buy all the equipment, to find staff, to decide, where to actually finish designing the kitchen, because the kitchen was half designed, and there were things we couldn't move, things we could move, and to try and so, and we didn't have a menu, like a proper menu, so we couldn't design the kitchen properly until we had that menu right. So yeah, it was. The hardest part was getting everything ready within the time frame that we did. And I think it was difficult, but we got there.
Well, the restaurant has been a real success since it has opened. What's the response been like from locals? Do you have any stories that you can tell us about?
Look, to be honest with you, sorry. To be honest with you, it's been different. We were lucky enough to have regulars within the first 6 weeks of opening. And these guys were coming back 2 to 3 times a week. We've got one guest that comes in, every week on the same, they'll come in every day and they'll order the same thing. And they love it, So it's, to have that kind of following so early in the early stages of a restaurant, I couldn't even believe it. Like, this never happens. But I think because it was something new that is in that area, and people don't have to go to the city for that quality. That's what brought them here. But yeah, we were lucky to have that following within the first, few months.
With that 4-month period to create a menu, is there a dish or two that you can tell us about that's starred on the menu?
I think everyone kind of loves the duck that we do, which it's quite unique. We take the whole duck, we take the legs, and we cut the legs off, just leaving the crown. We debone the legs, mince it, and make that into like a Lao sausage, which is like, plenty of garlic, glutinous rice, and salt. And then we stuff that underneath the skin of the breast. Almost like how, when you roast a chicken, you put the butter underneath the skin. And then we hang that, we hang it to dry in the cool room, like where a fan is, for about 2 days. And then we roast it like a Chinese style duck. So it comes out golden, and then we slice that finely and put that on a plate with some sauce, which we it's kind of similar to the duck sauce that you get when you go to the barbecue. You have a local barbecue, your Chinese barbecue that you eat with rice. It's similar to that sauce, but then we just kind of inject more Southeast Asian flavor with kaffir lime, lemongrass, coconut palm sugar, and stuff like that.
You mentioned you originally took the gig just as a short-term consultancy gig, and yet you're still there as executive chef. Well, what kept you there, and what do you love about the restaurant?
I like that kind of creativity that we have. It's something new that I've never done before, and trying to learn Thai cuisine it's quite difficult because I'm not versed in. I'm not the greatest in knowledge. I don't have the greatest knowledge in Thai food, so Buzz teaches me a lot about that. But and it's also the people. The team that I have. We've got a great team, and they're really loyal, and they're hardworking. And also people like Evie and George, they're great to work with because they're personable and we chat. We can have a chat, and it's not like you don't feel like you can't approach anybody there. But yeah, I think it's mainly the people that kind of makes me stay there.
You're currently experiencing another lockdown in Sydney. What's this period of time been like for you? You're in London, you were meant to go to New York, you ended up in Sydney, and now you have an amazing restaurant, but you're in lockdown. What sort of impact has it had on you?
Look, the first week was great because I was like, okay, I get a bit of a break. We had to take a step back and have a bit of a rest. The team gets rest, so we're all happy. We didn't think of it as being so bad. Now that it's dragged on, because for so long, it's a bit frustrating, but I'm just trying, it is what it is. I'm just trying to kind of see the positive note from it. It's giving me time to reflect on how I can improve the menu, how I can improve the service, how I can improve, the flow of the kitchen and how, so that it makes it easier for the team, the guys, makes it easier for the chefs, should I say. So it's given me a lot of time to reflect and to be able to kind of improve the business and operationally before I go back. But yeah, I think that's the kind of, it's the only way that I can kind of look at it and kind of move through this lockdown without kind of going insane or being bored.
Ibby and George have been building quite an amazing stable of restaurants in their group, including Lilymu. Is there plans in the future to create more of what you're offering in other locations?
I don't know if I can say that. I think that there is plans to kind of bring Lilymu closer to the city, but we'll have to tell. Time will have to tell. We can't say just yet.
Well, Brendan, that is an intriguing answer, and it's great to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Will do. Thanks for having me, man.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.